Deputy Ambassador, it gives me great pleasure to say a few words tonight, and especially to thank our sponsor, Dr. Naim Dangour, who unfortunately is not with us here tonight, but he's well represented by his son, Michael and Audrey. I have been following the work of Lynn and her team with Harif, and I think we should be jolly proud in England that we have people like them working for this cause. Since 1971, before some of you were born, Naim Dangour, in his Scribe, the magazine which appeared regularly, was able to highlight the glories and the tragedies of Jews in Arab and Oriental lands. And he did a tremendous amount to make people aware of our ancient history when many of them were forgetting it. And he brought over to London 400 Sepharim from Iraq so that they could be given to Jewish communities throughout England and abroad. And only a couple of hours ago, David, his son, phoned me up to say that next month, Dr. Dangour is going to sponsor a conference of religious leaders of Iran, of Iraq, and of Israel to see whether they can realize that they're working in the name of God and not in the name of politicians, so that they could try to bring peace to this troubled area. Let me tell you, this is not publicized, but I have the zechut at least twice a year, with the permission of the government of Iran, to send tefillin and mezuzot regularly for the 25,000 Jews who are still there. And they allow me to do that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a sign that we have to be optimists and not pessimists. And hence, what Harif is doing with the justice for Jews in Arab countries is so important in realizing a future which is positive and glorious. I personally am an eternal optimist, and I always like to look at the positive side. As a student of Jewish history, I remember what happened in Andalusia in Spain, when Jews, Christians, and Arabs were living with relative peace between each other. And one of the great Spanish kings, King Ferdinand III, tried to bring them all together. And to this day, if you go to the Seville Cathedral, you will see where he's buried, and the stone commemorating him is written in Arabic, in Latin, and in Hebrew. And that tells you how we have been able to work together. Great scholars, Shmuel and Agid, were allowed to run Granada in the name of the Muslims. And when Ferdinand and Isabella expelled the Jews from Spain, the Sultan in Constantinople said, "You call Ferdinand and Isabella wise by their expelling the Jews and allowing them to come to Arab lands? They have impoverished Spain and aggrandized Arab countries," and that's exactly what happened. And that is why we have to be positive about the future. And I personally have had the pleasure of going to Morocco on more than one occasion with Sidney Assor, who's here tonight. And I remember that in 1981, I had the zechut to put a mezuzah on the first building of the Israeli Charge d'Affaires in Rabat. And then Sidney took me to meet one of the ministers of the government whose son had just married the daughter of the King of Morocco. And they showed us all the pictures of the wedding. And Estelle made a faux pas and she said, "And where is the Queen?" And they answered, "The Queen? You can never take a photograph of the Queen in Morocco." But before we left the house, the lady of the house turned around to me and says, "Rabbi, will you bless me?" And I started to bless her in English. And she interrupted me and said, "I don't want a blessing in English. You give me a blessing in Hebrew." And that is what we've got to look forward to see that there were times when we got on well together. And of course there were times like we have suffered, like many of you here have suffered. But we have to look forward. And by doing the work that Harif is doing, we will show our glorious moments in our history. And finally, what I have to do with great pleasure is to ask Michael and Audrey to come forward and make a little presentation to thank the Dangurs for their generosity. Thank you, Michael. Do you want a picture? Let's see it. Thank you.